activity that we've had going on during the past year. Partnerships with the Alzheimer's Society, Parkinson's UK, Essex Activate, HAF, got huge HAF programs planned with Brentwood at the moment that have just started in the last week. Parkinson's memberships, obviously, we offer for free, and we did assist with an information event at the Hutton and Shenfield Union Church in April. There is a partnership support network, and we're hoping to be a key part of that moving forward. Exercise referrals, our target is a minimum of 50, but we've seen 91 referrals at 11 different venues, from 11 different venues. 66% completed that and are still active. Sport for Confidence is something that we're incredibly proud of. It's something that was incepted in Basildon and has kind of gravitated to us and across the local boroughs, but we've seen 230 sessions delivered in 25-26, and that is only going to grow in the next year. It's an extremely good programme that gives support to mentally and physically disabled adults, using sport as an area to re-enable them into mainstream activity, and it's been hugely popular in the borough. These are some of the testimonials that customers have given. I'm not going to read them out, but I'll just leave it there for a couple of seconds. These are on the slides that were circulated, but we do get some exceptional feedback from the referral programs, and it does just kind of capitalise on what we are there for and what we're hoping to deliver moving forward for this community. Another little snapshot of something that was delivered. There was menopause awareness talks, which is a programme that was run out originally with colleagues, but then was spread out to other areas, and it was done in a couple of the community libraries extremely successfully. You can see the dates there on the right-hand side, and all three of them were very well attended. Again, this is another project which we sought funding for. It was an Essex community project. Our focus was really kind of developing in a relatively new contract for us, a community partnership, and to meet as many people as we could in the area that would help us push our impact and push our reach. And it was very well attended, which enabled us to kind of reach 50 organisations that we may not have kind of partnered with had we not done the event. King George's Playing Fields has been a great venue for community activity in the last year. Vintage Cash, I'll just pick out a couple, which is an event which we held where customers would come in and get their collectible items valued and possibly sell. Very, very well attended. And then you move across to the kind of sporting activities that we're running, like the karate festivals and the mini athletics festivals. The team there are actively involved in the community and are looking to push and drive activity within that facility. On the ground, they've got great partnerships now with the golf club, and things are really moving forward at that facility. You can see on the left-hand side there, which is a shot of the pool and where we were at before the developments took place. There, with the pool on the finished on the right, so you can see a clear, stark difference between the two facilities and how great a job the investment has had to the facility itself. That one's another amazing shot. If you look at the poolside area, I think the lighting here is amazing, and it really does lift the area and kind of make it a far more pleasant experience coming and swimming in the pool. I think that was before the open day a few weekends ago that we had, and again I've put some more images in there of the pool itself and the development. Feedback has been amazing. We're already seeing a spike in swim lesson sales and casual swimming, and I'm confident that when one of us comes back to report to you, we'll be showing an increase in swimming usage based on that investment, and it's been extremely well received by all of your residents. Event attendances. We do have a fantastic event centre that we're privileged to manage on your behalf at the Brentwood Centre, and you can see some of the events there that have been held during the period of reporting. and there's more fantastic events planned for the next period. But again, really, really good numbers that you see there in most areas. And we're hoping to improve on that once the development's finished. This is just a slide that we've kind of thrown in to just show what we see as being our real priorities as we move forward in the contract. We do want to see an increase in participation, but on top of that, we want to see us engaging more with the communities within Brentwood, and also trying to make a difference to those users and those clubs and groups that we're engaging with. We want to see a growth in the exercise referral scheme, and we want to see our reach increase across the social value areas, and see an increase in that cash value that we're giving to your community. Young people is obviously really important, and we'd like to see an increase in activity, and we're actively trying to champion activity for the youngsters. And you'll see an increase in teen gym usage. You're going to see more an extension to the activities that we offer at King George's playing fields, targeting some of those youth areas that we see being really key to our success in the borough. Older population increase. Again, you can see we are well aware of the demographic makeup at Brentwood, and we are going to be targeting activity to assist that, and making sure that we're delivering for those for the senior wellbeing programs as well. Net Promoter Score, which is basically what customers say about us. Again, we want to see an increase from the baseline that we've set now for the next year moving forward. And ultimately, we want the customer experience to be as good as it possibly can, to improve our customer interactions, give our customers more of our time by making sure that our online journeys are as good as possible, so the face-to-face interactions they have with us are more meaningful. Again, this is kind of a bit more kind of high-level stuff that we want to do as a company moving forward. So this outlines our kind of real values and our mission in the next 5 years, really. So we want to make a difference to our customers, but our community, and also being aligned with our borough's community carbon strategies about how we're going to be managing the energy crisis is extremely important to us. But we're also committed to employing for the local communities as well, and making sure that that's a key driver for us. Again, I've probably mentioned this already, to be honest with you, because these are the things that we're looking at doing programming moving forward. But you can see we've got some big events planned in September, and also we've got the changes that are going to be happening to the buildings moving forward, as well as the ones that have just happened in the poolside area. And that's me. Did I make the 10 minutes? I was trying really hard.
Thank you, Mr. Aldous. I will now move the recommendation so we can continue with the questions and debate. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair. Is that my right to speak?
Okay, thank you very much. So just move to the members. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point? Councillor Mayo.
I'll, given the length of the agenda, I'll just restrict myself to one. I was very interested in the local resident usage KPI, because quite honestly I didn't really understand it. So it says 46.8% of those using the centre are from Brentwood, and then there's Havering, Basildon and Thurrock, and just doing a quick tot up, there's 25% missing somewhere. Does that mean that we haven't, is that 25% people who have visited the centre who have not been registered as coming from anywhere, or is there another explanation?
You get a significant percentage of people that don't want to give you their data, or the data is incorrect when they put it in online. Probably 15, 20% of that percentage are people that have joined up for their Avon Active card online, and they may have put in a postcode in error. So you get some errors. We try and strip that out. When the customers come back in, we try and say to them, we need to, it will flag as a data field that's missing, but it does take a period of time for us to get that back. But it's a combination of those two. It's errors in either we've collected the data wrong, the customers have not given us that data, or, yeah.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Yeah, not a great deal to add. Thank you for the presentation. I guess my question is, you're going from strength to strength. You've done really well in Basildon. You're doing great in Brentwood. What is it you need to really get you past that post to get you really flying? Is there anything that you need from us as a council that will help you achieve your goals?
I think the plans are there to help us achieve. I think officers have done a great job in pushing the investment that's come in for Brentwood. And if we can get those plans up and running and get those facilities open and get the developments at Brentwood done, the borough's leisure stock will be in very good shape, and we'll be able to take them from strength to strength. We are in a fantastic area for leisure. Brentwood is amazing. It's got beautiful green spaces, and that's one of the things that I think we're going to be challenging. We're going to be challenging our teams to get out and using those spaces more, and not just the confines of our leisure centres, because we can really work in that area as well. But I think in terms of what we need, officers have already done it. We've just got to get it across the line, I think, and then we'll be in really, really good shape.
Thank you. Do we have any more? If we don't, thank you, Mr. Aldous. It's the limited number of questions is probably to do with a long agenda, and it's all positive. I don't think it's any other reflection. If no other speakers move to a vote on that item. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Chair, I'd just like to say just a couple of points within that. During my mayoral year last year, I used King George's playing fields twice for a couple of events, and they were really well managed, and it was an excellent facility for doing so. I attended the community networking event, and that was very positive. Got to meet lots of different organisations who managed to offer some cross-fertilisation and within each other give very good advice. And in terms of the pool, recently we had a visit from our Tampton friends from France, and they offered some very good feedback on the quality of the pool. So it's a very positive really nice event for them. So.
I mean, we were lucky enough to be.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now vote on the recommendations on page 27 of the agenda, which is R1, that members note this report and the presentation. All those for? Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous. We'll move to the next item, which is item 6, which is the Tenant Board Member Co-option, which is on page 59. The report sets out the proposals to co-opt residents of the Housing Partners Group onto the Housing, Health and Communities Committee for housing-related items in accordance with the Council's constitution. Ms March, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add at this time. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Russell?
Chair, could I just ask a question? I know that Councillor Russell is going to be quite detailed. We had the Tenants Talkback Committee, which I thought had been reinstated a couple of years ago, and now we've got this. What is the difference? What?
Mrs Marsh, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, so Tenant Talkback and the Housing Partners are ultimately the same thing, but we put it out to residents and asked them to rename themselves if they wanted to, and Housing Partners is what their suggestion came up as. So they've rebranded themselves as the Housing Partners, just something that's a little bit of a change from the Tenant Talkback original, because it is a slightly different format set up of the panel.
Okay, Councillor Russell?
Yes, it's actually just an amendment to the recommendations, really, that I'd want to put to the committee. Because I don't see as the Housing Partners are subordinate to this committee. And when you read the recommendations, it sounds like, well, the Housing Partners nominate up to 2 representatives. It's not actually telling us what we're doing here. So I've wrote down an amendment here, if you'd like to hear it, that the if you don't mind me using the HH&C committee, agrees to establish up to 2 non-voting positions for representatives nominated by housing partners and invites housing partners to submit nominations for appointment by the committee to attend meetings where public housing related items are considered.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I don't think it had much change to the recommendation,
Other
so
than,
we're happy to accept it if the
yeah,
officers
it's
don't
just
have any
that-
flags.
It's just that the recommendations say that the housing partners nominate up to 2 representatives. What are we voting on here? You know, we're saying that another body is going to do this. It seems to me that, yeah, I'll happily give you my.
If you pass it to Mrs. Borman, we'll just take note of that for the minutes.
Otherwise, I don't have, you know, a great deal of problem with it, other than it says, I think it's a 1.8. It says representatives will be able to participate in closed sessions unless the committee resolves otherwise as specific items. And you know, I think that closed items would be closed to the public, and they are the public. And it also goes on to say that they will be able to contribute as councillors do. So will they have the opportunity to move amendments, etc. It's not explained in the report. I'm trying not to be pedantic.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I mean, I think what you're meaning here is the co-option that's in the Constitution. Unfortunately, we can't change that here today. You can bring it up at the CWG, but co-option is in the Constitution about what that involves, and it is a non-voting member. They can speak on any item. Unfortunately, as a non-voting member, they can't move amendments or second items. But they fall for the discussion in the debate, speak for the 3 minutes like any other member on the relevant item.
Just seeking clarity on the constitutional process of that, which isn't outlined in the report.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Davies.
I'd like to welcome Aaron to this position. I think it's nice because in years gone by, we had people who were more active and took more of an active part in the committee and the discussions. And somehow over the years, that's kind of dropped off. And then we sort of ended up with either one person coming or nobody coming for periods. And I just think it's really good to have somebody that we know is active in the community, is also a tenant, and therefore can be a very good representative of those tenants. And I assume that whatever's said in the committee will get fed back into the tenants committee as well. So I wholeheartedly welcome this recommendation.
Thank you. I think officers might correct me, but I think they have the option to comment on the papers before the committee as well, so that can be included in the report. Is that correct?
Yeah, so just to confirm on the implications of the report, more of the items now where there's a section on engagement, actually a lot of the feedback comes from the group and the tenants' representatives directly rather than us coming up with our own implications. Obviously that group is now feeding in their comments to all of the reports that relate to obviously housing landlord items.
Okay, thank you very much. So, got no further speakers. I'll move the recommendation on page 59. That in line with Councillor Russell's amendment. So, do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll now vote on the recommendations on page 3 of the agenda. All those for? Okay, once again, unanimous. Thank you very much. So item number 7 is the 2025-26 Q4 Housing Performance Report. The report begins on page 79 of the agenda and the appendix starts on page 63, although I think that might actually be the other way around. The report informs members of the performance of the Housing Department for Q3 and Q4 of the previous financial year 2025-26. Ms Stretch, do you have anything to add?
Just to introduce Neil Watts here behind me, who is the new Managing Director for Axis Europe. So he's obviously, there's no specific item because we alternate between overall performance and repairs performance, but he's obviously joined us tonight for the committee. But nothing further to add, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, committee. Just to note, there are page numbers at the bottom. It's quite, so if you could refer to them so we can get to the right page when mentioned. Do you have any questions on the report? No? Okay. Oh, sorry. Councillor Mayo.
Okay, page 65 regarding rents. I know we're coming on to another item on this. Okay, but I just want to understand the current position. So in the box here, we have total arrears of just over £1 million. The number of tenants in arrears is over 1,000. 65. The former tenant arrears is 759. So it's of current tenants, we've got 337k of arrears of current tenants. You're going to explain this to me in a minute, Lauren, I know. How many tenants are we talking about? Because 1,025 is, what proportion of those are former tenants and what proportion of those are current tenants? That's my long-winded question. That's what I need to know.
Councillor Mayo. Ms. Stretch, did you have a guesstimate on that?
Yeah, so it's not quite that. So the total arrears, that's current arrears, sorry, we should have added the word current in there. So that box of £1 million, just over £1 million is your current arrears. So that is current tenants. And there is 1,025 at that time who are in arrears. Former tenant arrears, that is, can go back a number of years. That is everybody who is no longer a tenant who still owes a debt to the council. So they are separate figures. So that is just over £1 million of current arrears, and there is 1,000 current tenants that are in arrears. The former tenant, that is any debt of somebody who is no longer a tenant, but it still remains on the balance sheet.
Yes, Councillor
So
Mayo.
just to help us here, what proportion of our current tenants is 1,000 tenants? How many tenants have we got?
So there's 2,500 tenants. So it is but of those 1,000, there will be some arrears there where they are minimal. So actually a high proportion, so nearly 75% of that debt is held by only a couple of hundred tenants. So there's a lot of people in some level of debt, but the debt is quite small, and people will go in and out of debt. So with this, you can only run it at a point in time. Although your tenancy agreement says that you should always be paying your rent in advance by a month, you do have people who pay by direct debit who will go within the month, they go in and out of arrears, but they're not really. They're not true arrears. Although you should pay it all up front, they will clear their debt every once a month when their, say, direct debit goes through. So although there's a high proportion of tenants that are in arrears, it is only a very small number of those that makes up quite a proportion of that £1 million.
Thank you. Mr. Watts?
Hi, I'm going to ask a question mainly for my own kind of education. Before I started working in charities and organisations, £1 million seemed like quite a lot of money. It doesn't seem like a lot of money anymore in the scope of what we're looking at. But let's not be fooled that it is a lot of money. What impact does that actually have on you as an organisation in terms of the service that's able to be provided to other tenants, and how does it, for us, I mean, for 100 tenants to owe that amount of money, give or take, how does it get to that point? I might be asking questions but beyond me, sorry.
So Yeah, I mean, if you look at our planned works programme, say every year, so that's say at the moment, say £5 million. So £1 million is quite a proportion of the works we can do. What I would say is a lot of that is quite aged debt, so it's been held for a long time. In terms of it's a significant amount of money. In terms of us being able to hold that debt against kind of cash balances, we can do that, and obviously we collect a lot of money. But yeah, it's a significant proportion if you think we had an extra £1 million of what we could do with to the stock. In terms of why it takes so long, we obviously will only evict people who are not paying. So there are a lot of tenants who have quite high levels of arrears, so they may have a few £1,000s worth of arrears. But if they are paying, and sometimes that is only a small amount every month, they may only be clearing a few pounds of that. But as long as debt is going down, we won't really actively pursue that to court. What we are looking to do is obviously pursue people who we believe have the funds to pay and just are refusing to pay. What I would say is the court process is very long for this. The threshold to be able to evict someone from social housing is quite high. We've got new public sector equality duties, etc., that we have to comply with. So we are working through those cases. But yeah, like I said, if people are paying, we may hold that debt. But if they are gradually getting it down, it may take them years to pay it off. In social housing, we wouldn't necessarily take those cases to court. Hopefully that answers most of your questions.
Thank you. Councillor Barber. We'll go to Councillor Davies until you're... Councillor Davies.
I'd just like to say thank you, gentlemen from Access, for coming, because in the past we have raised quite a few concerns, and we are aware of previous meetings where there had been restructuring within the organisation which had some service delivery impact. But I see that there has been a number of improvements made and introduced. I just wondered, the video calling diagnostic function, has that been well received by residents? Are they actually able to cope with it? And I also noticed AI is mentioned, and does the AI doesn't argue with each other, does it? Does it actually assist in the process?
Thank you, Councillor. Can you just point to the page number that you're referring to? 69. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Watts, are you coming back?
Sure, thank you. So the video calling, and we've got a chat box functionality as well, variable uptakes, obviously, it's something that's still quite new. The AI is used in call handling to sort of help support the upload of jobs that we carry out. It's used differently for different clients as well. It's certainly used for chaser calls for all of our clients. We feel that there's actually a greater opportunity of AI, as we probably all do in very many industries, except when you're a plumber maybe or a carpenter. But and we feel that the AI will help support, for example, in repairs, a lot more diagnostics of a repair. You know, you're actually interested of the information that's coming in, regurgitating all the information and actually reutilising, particularly when the use of video and or photography is used, because you can see the images from previous jobs and match it to new jobs. And we've actually got a small AI working party looking at all of the different opportunities, because we think if we don't, A, we'll be left behind, also it potentially can add efficiencies in the future.
Councillor Barber, is the microphone working? Okay. In the meantime, I'll ask you to move to a seat that has it. Okay. I think if you move the microphones, it just moves the cameras, unfortunately. Yeah.
Is it? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We just wanted you to move a few times.
Thank you, Mrs. Borman. So page 70, page 71, it's damp and mould. So a couple of things about that. Apologies if it's elsewhere in the pack, but I didn't want to jump the hundreds of pages between the different sections. In terms of the number of open cases of damp and mould at the moment, we talk about in May how many were
were newly initiated with access and how many remain outstanding of the 23. How many are currently outstanding in total from previous months, along with the latest monthly reporting, is my first question, please.
I think you have to, Barbara, does one of the officers want to answer that one? I guess this is a report back from last year. So.
Yeah, so I would need to take a bit of time to look up the exact, but what I can tell you is the numbers are fairly static. So although that's a position in time, they are the overall numbers that are open at that position in time. So there are not a high number. I mean, you'd expect it at this time of the year that the numbers of open damp and mould cases go down. They do obviously jump up quite a lot when you get towards kind of the winter months, so from October onwards. But the numbers are, as we're in that picture, we have not got more overdue or more open cases than we had at that point in time, even now to date.
Thank you. That's very reassuring that it's the total number outstanding. It might be just worth tweaking the language on a future pack because it would more accurately reflect the position. In terms of the ones where they are accepted as legitimate cases of damp and mould, are we seeing any particular characteristics in terms of a particular type of property, whether it's single skin brick, whether it's communal flats? Yeah. What's the pattern there? Is it particularly affecting one type of property and one whether it's high-rise flats or lower-level flats than another? Thank you.
So we've got, there's a balance across. So we've got some properties that, so for example, down in Ingatestone we had Frining Lane, which was suffering from damp and mould and needed retrofit and single skin. So there are some properties that we know there are works needed to the property to deal with the issue of damp and mould. The majority of reports that are coming through, if I'm honest, it's often because the property is overcrowded for the number of people that are in, rather than, so we're putting in extractor fans to help, but realistically, until we deal with the issue of the family that's overcrowded and being able to try and move them, there's not a lot other than damp and mould washes, which we continue to do to help to get rid of the active mould. There is not really anything that we're going to be able to do to the property that would resolve that property having damp and mould in, and that is the higher proportion of cases that we're getting through in damp and mould. It's not necessarily a property issue, it's the combination of the amount of people that are in that flat is not what the flat was designed for, and the belongings, etc., that is creating the conditions for damp and mould. And obviously we're building new properties, etc., to try and resolve the overcrowding issues, but in the meantime, actually all we're able to do is manage the situation with damp and mould, and there's no things we can do in the property that are going to resolve that completely.
I'll ask one final question, Chair, and it'll be quiet. So in relation to the ones where we know that there's a particular type of issue with a particular type of property, at the moment, within not the next calendar year, but in the next few years, do we have all of those types of property where we have a higher incidence of damp and mould in a plan over the next, say, 5 years to address those over a time period, please?
Yes, so we've had stock condition surveys done on all of our properties, so we know what works are needed, and obviously all of this information feeds in, so and even responsive repairs information is now feeding into our asset database, so we absolutely do know what properties need works doing to them. Some of those works are quite expensive, so it's balancing the money that we have available to do plan works to do them. But we will obviously get round to that as quickly as we can. But yeah, all of this information is feeding into our asset system. We've got a huge amount of property data now on every single one of our properties across the borough. So yes, there is a long-term plan. Where we can tackle it through responsive repairs rather than planned works, we absolutely will do that. We've got obviously door programs, that's helping a lot in terms of ventilation and keeping out the kind of cold. So yeah, there's a lot of works going on, and yeah, there's a plan in place for it. It's just being able to afford to be able to do all the works as quickly as we'd like to.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Mr. Watts.
Hi, mine's for the other Mr. Watts. Hi, Neil, sorry. So my role here is to bring forward comments from other tenants. One of the questions that I that I had that I wanted to bring to this was, obviously you guys have done a lot of work in over the past 6 months in the development of your organisation, and you are a large organisation, and so a lot of that is based around reputation. So one of the things that is a reoccurring thing within tenants is the number of callbacks to a job. Is something that I personally as a tenant has experienced, from ridiculous things like the ball cock valve in the back of my toilet blew. I didn't want to touch the water. I usually do my repairs in my own house. That being said, I had someone come in to replace it. In the time that they were there, they changed the ball cock valve, leant on the toilet cistern, pulled it off the wall so it was hanging off the wall and sitting on the back pipe, and then left the job, and I had to call someone out and wait another 3 days for that to be fixed. That's an example of my own experience. If we look, there's quite a lot of those experiences, and I could list other personal ones that I've had. I think my question to put to you is, obviously reputation for you as an organisation is huge. You are using subcontractors. What's that process that you're using to bring in some of those subcontractors? Because some of the work that I've seen from them personally, and other tenants have mentioned themselves, is subpar. Sorry.
Thank you. Two parts to that really. So firstly, in-house teams. So we've started off what's called an Elevate 5 programme. So we are sharing salary bandings with all of our teams. So we've implemented new salary bandings from apprentice, advanced apprentice, through to single trade, multi-trade, and then what are called super users, if you like, or our more elite team. That's a centralised team. So there's an opportunity for each individual sets of operatives to escalate up into a promotional opportunity. Secondly, throughout this year, we are going to implement an incentive which is quality based. So first time fix is will be one of those quality measures. That's not in place yet, but that is part of my plan. I did it at my previous organisation, and it helps support that process. And also, the salary bandings are more generous than we have offered. On average this year, we've allowed up to a 7% increase for operatives, and this is from July this year, where an average increase would be sort of nearer 2%, for example, so to allow us to have that flex for the operatives. That hopefully will then bring us more internal in-house delivery and reduce the reliance on subcontractors. Our subcontract onboarding has gone through a change, and it's still evolving. And there is a new process to onboard them, it's got more rigorous steps within it. That's as much governance as well as quality, to be honest. So around insurances and all those type of things. New system implemented as well. What we are looking at improving also is the onboarding and monitoring process of all our subcontractors, and add a more of a standardised approach across all of our contracts. What I've noticed in the first, say, 3 to 4 months of working here is some inconsistencies on each contract or different way divisional managers work. I want to bring that consistency, sort of more of a best practice approach. But certainly, it costs us more money to go back, so it's not in our favour to do so, as you appreciate. And equally, my previous role was on a client side for 8.5 years. I worked as a client before joining, and I understand the importance of resident satisfaction, the efficiencies of the delivery, particularly around right first time. That doesn't really mean first time fix, but certain factors we're looking at in part of our transformation is that van stock evolution, the skill set, the upskilling, the skills matrix of the operatives. We are trying to send the right person to do the right job for the right amount of time, etc., the right materials. We won't get it right all the time, certainly not. Diagnostics would have to be better on our behalf as well, but equally, that is certainly our aspiration for all marginal gains. Thank you.
Just to follow on from Mr. Watt's question, I concur to the feedback, certainly feedback that I've received empirically from residents regarding those kind of subcontractor issues. And one of the things that many of them have mentioned is when they're promised callbacks on issues, so it can't be resolved with the first visit. They're promised callbacks, and that someone will be looking into it and come back as soon as possible without a given time to resolve. Often they're not receiving that call back and they're having to chase. And if it's of a significant thing that's affecting their household, that can be quite difficult if you're working, shift working, or having to then chase these people. So that's a deep impact to residents. Is that one of the indicators that you're chasing, that those callbacks, those promises are kept?
Certainly, two things actually. One of the key ones is is the job still open? Is the order still open? And is there a future appointment? And we have jobs which don't have future appointments. So as far as I'm concerned, it's sitting there doing nothing. It's sitting there in a timestamp of we don't know what's happening next. So there's a big focus on that at the moment, and that's something that probably wasn't a measure, was a big focus, honestly. So I look at 2 or 3 things really. One, what my open orders are against the average of your demand. So for example, you've got just over 10 days worth of demand of orders open currently, which is a good place. What isn't so good, as we go on to, is about the age profile of some of those orders. Talking a lot about that only earlier today. One of the other measures I look at is the communication path, if you like, sort of resident journey, I'd call it. You know, and are we seamless in the resident journey? Part of the engineer training and the enhancement is try and make that next appointment whilst at the property. Something we're trying to focus on within our inductions, etc. And also looking at data sets to say, is there a job open without a future appointment? So that's certainly important. If it's got a future appointment, generally there's been communication, obviously, you know, because you've made the appointment, and we don't generally just put an appointment in for a job that's in without agreeing it with the resident first. Obviously, potentially apart from maybe communal repairs, for example. So yeah, 100%. That's one of our focus areas.
Thank you. Thank you. If I have any further speakers, this has no recommendations, as it is just to be noted. As we do have a regulator of the social housing, can everyone agree that they've noted the report? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move to item 8, which is the Housing Services Formal Complaints Annual Report. The report begins on page 83 of the agenda, and the report presents the annual review of formal complaints received by the Housing Services during 2025-26 financial year. Ms. Meek, or Mr. Stretch, did you have anything to add?
I've got no.
Oh.
I think they're in the wrong place.
Oh, right. You might have accidentally been on camera quite a lot there. We'll just take it away from us.
Thank you, Chair. So without repeating too much of what is in the report, I would like to note that whilst the complaint volumes have increased, this is in line with what we're seeing across the council in all services. This does include that the complaints are being recorded more appropriately and more accurately, and there's also the growing use of AI-assisted correspondence that we are seeing as well. However, I do want to note that the performance against response times still remains strong, as does the low number of overturned stage 2 complaints. So we are continuing to focus on strengthening the learning and ensuring identified improvements are delivered, and this is through the Housing Improvement Board. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, I'll just move the recommendations on page 83, that the committee considers the information contained within the Housing Formal Complaints Annual Report and endorses the continued implementation of the Housing Ombudsman's Complaint Handling Code. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you. And I'll just move to the committee for any questions or comments. Councillor Mayo?
Okay. Can you, I mean, you've touched on it already, to be honest, but can you tell us a bit more about the impact of AI-generated complaints? Because I'd like to really understand why that drives up complaint numbers. If you could explain that to us, that'd be great.
So our presumption is that the complaints they're easier to make than ever before. I think because people have that use on their mobile phone, so instead of picking up the phone or writing a long email, I just think it's that much easier for them to put in writing what has happened and what the problem is. So like we're saying, that those problems still exist. So, you know, they're all still being recorded. However, it's just more easy for them to do so. So we are seeing an impact in terms of the capacity that we have to deal with that.
So what's giving it away that they're AI generated? Is there certain phrases that you're seeing more often than not, or how do you identify that it's likely to be AI generated?
Without going into too much detail, if you have used any of the AI apps, you can pick out certain parts of it where it might be in bold, or certain phrases, certain laws that are mentioned. So that's how we're kind of identifying it at the moment. We are not seeing any advice come out from the Ombudsman yet in terms of the volume they're having and the impact it's the knock-on effect it's having. However, they are saying that their complaints have also increased in a similar percentage. They just haven't put it down to that reason as yet. So we will obviously continue to seek that advice.
So that was going to be my follow-up about what advice have the Ombudsman given. It's obviously such a new phenomenon that they haven't given you any yet. It'd be interesting to see and whether that then leads to a sort of recording of how many are likely to be AI generated and all the rest of it, which would be helpful to us. One other quick point I wanted to make, there was obviously an increase in leaseholder complaints over the last year. To what extent is that down to the fact that we had a planned works programme during the period of this report?
Yeah, so it's significant. On two folds, obviously, you know, there's a lot of cost that goes to the leaseholders around that, but equally, their expectations have grown. We're doing works on their properties and they need information quicker, or that the works weren't up to standard, and we've called them as leasehold complaints. So yeah, it goes hand in hand with the planned works programme, but some of that is things that we need to improve on. And I think we have already, from doing the planned works programme, we have a much better I think communication strategy with leaseholders very early on in that process, and managing those expectations. So, but yeah, having not done the extensive work for quite some time, yeah, that is pretty much the total increase in complaints we've had.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just the observation that Councillor Mayo made about AI generated stuff, and obviously if you give people the ability to make a complaint easier, then we're going to see that spike, right? What's saddening is there have been a lot of unhappy campers in the past that haven't actually reported those things. But, on the pie chart on page 98, it says that complaint categories, the largest portion of that is you know, plumbing and heating, ventilation, and Ms. Stretch mentioned about the mould and damp earlier on. Why is this that we like, particularly with plumbing? Why are we getting issues with that? Is it because it's, you know, old stock, or are we not servicing these things? It's just like, you know, they are stand out, aren't they? And it's just sort of what we're doing to make sure we can kind of reduce that in future.
So, although they're categorised, obviously plumbing, heating and ventilation, it may not be that they're complaining about the stock or the quality. Unfortunately, a lot of those complaints are about the people who have gone out to repair those items, and they're categorised like that. Not saying that there is, and I revert back to kind of the answer I gave to Councillor Barber, there's a huge amount of work that we need to do to our stock. We know that in place, but although that we still categorise them in the individual bits, a lot of those complaints will still be about the operatives and about the fact of, as was pointed out earlier, often on both of those things, it's a follow-up visit. They're not first-time fixes. And a lot of the issues that we've had is that the person has attended, they've identified the problem, and then they have either not returned quickly enough or that follow-up appointment's not been booked. So it's not necessarily about those items, it's the whole service.
Thank you. Mr. Watts?
So I think for me, kind of thinking of what tenants might ask, I think the same question for you guys as I asked Neil when he was here. If you're using subcontractors and they are letting you down, and I think I can't find the page within the report where it's quite clearly outlined that there is a high level of complaints with regards to Axis. Where's that line? Where's that line drawn in terms of reputationally? Because I think a lot of the stuff that I hear and I've heard in meetings when we sat with other tenants is the councillor doing this, the councillor doing other bits and pieces. But actually, for a lot of it, it's not the council that have any control over that. So how is that communicated, or how's that managed?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I think across any social housing landlord, the highest proportion of complaints, no matter what contractor you are using, is always on repairs, because it's the highest volume of things that you do, and obviously it's what matters to people. I can say that, you know, we've been open in this committee room that we have had a dip in performance from Axis in the last year. I have spent a huge proportion of my time dealing with that and holding them to account. If I'm honest, the best way to hold them to account is financially, and we have. So we have utilised everything that we can within that contract to hold them to account. I'm not saying that they wouldn't want to do it anyway, you know, that they do as a company, but actually with private companies, the best way you can get them to improve is by obviously withholding funds. So we've been doing that. We've increased, so between myself and Mrs. Marsh, and obviously Mrs. Burton when she was here, we've increased the number of operational meetings. We are seeing those stats weekly. We are going through them. It has, without doubt, had an impact on the council, and it always does, and reputationally it hurts us, but we are the contract managers. We put them in, so to some extent that we have to put that. But in relation to complaints, like I said, we've utilised the compensation that's paid, and we will make sure that compensation is paid in line with the local government ombudsman, and I think we've paid out the most compensation in the last year that we have, and that is kind of in line with the number of complaints we've had. And the council doesn't pay that, we recharge Axis for that amount, so that's not coming out of the tenants' effectively rent money.
So in terms of reporting internally, is there, obviously we were talking about complaints report says plumbing or lighting or whatever, and it's fixed to the original issue. Is there something to be said in terms of how that reporting is managed to that kind of change that affects your internal reports? You understand what I'm trying to say? Sorry, I'm not giving you words.
Yeah, so we get a lot more detail, obviously, behind the scenes. We can break that back down by job numbers. There's been particular things that have come out through seeing that detail. So, for example, we've got a lot of roofing jobs that are outstanding. There was a subcontractor being used by Axis. They have now changed. A new roofing contractor has been on board. But a lot of those complaints will relate to the delay that people have experienced. So, yeah, there's a huge amount of reporting information. The point that I do think from what you've raised is, I think sometimes we're probably not that great at communicating at the comms out because we're so busy behind the scenes trying to correct it. And obviously I'm very honest in this chamber, but how many people are watching to see that? So you are right, and I think we need to take that on board about what we do around comms to all of our tenants so that they know exactly what we are doing about Axis and that we're holding them to account, albeit that, like I said, I will never sit here and just say it's on them. It is on us. We are the contract managers, and so it's on us to improve. But yeah, I do think we could do better with our communication out to tenants about it.
Thank you. If I don't have any further speakers, thank you very much for the report. Just so that it has been consistent from the housing officers that there wasn't enough complaints 3 years ago, and they've improved the way that it's reported, and that's why it's going up. It is by design. We can try and get that number down now. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So I'll now move to the vote on the recommendations. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move to the next item. Sorry, I will correct that. I didn't ask for a seconder. So I'll move the recommendations once more. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, and we'll just repeat that vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you. Right, so we're on item 9, which is the implementation of the Strategic Local Lettings Plan. The report begins on page 109 of the agenda, and this report seeks approval for a single overarching local lettings plan, LLP, to apply to all new councils delivered schemes across the borough. Ms. Stretch, do you have anything to add?
So just, to add that, so as has just been said, this report seeks approval for the new strategic local lettings plan for the first lettings of all our new council homes delivered through the Strategic Housing Development Programme. A tenant consultation was undertaken earlier this year, which showed strong support for prioritising existing tenants, recognising medical and accessibility needs and promoting safe and respectful communities. So reflecting this feedback, the proposed policy aims to make best use of our housing stock and ensure that new council homes deliver the greatest possible benefit for our local residents. So by giving the priority to existing council and housing association tenants whose housing needs have changed, we can help residents to move into accommodation that better meets their needs and freeing up larger homes for those who need them most. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll quickly move the recommendations on page 109, which is to approve the Strategic Housing Plan framework as set out in Appendix A, and 2, agrees that the local lettings framework will be applied to the new affordable housing delivery of 145 new homes by the Strategic Housing Development Programme as set out in section 1.1 of the report. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair. Reserve my right to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's move to the committee. Pardon? There is a third recommendation on page
110.
Sorry, in my notes.
There's something to
It is, yes, over the page. Yes, it just didn't transfer to my phone. That delegates authority to the Director of Housing in consultation with the Chair of this committee to make minor amendments to the LLP as required. Right, so let's move to questions now. Councillor Parker. We see nodding, 53. I think your maths is correct.
Try again, completely surveys. So basically, if we have one person answer, then we could have 100% on all these percentages that are down here. So I'm not particularly got any problem with the way we're going about allocating premises and so forth. It just seems to me that we put a lot of effort into surveys and so on and so forth, and I know from experience that the results we get in Brentwood are actually zilch, to be quite honest. And you know, even big surveys about the cinema, I think, just generated 1,500 returns. So I accept what you put down here, but I just find that it's open to contradiction or argument, because we're talking about 54 people who, or whatever, answering the survey, and we've got 3 paragraphs using all those percentages of 54 people, which I think spoils the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Parker. Obviously, the number of people is actually in the report, so you can use that to judge how much weight you put on it, but I don't think it means we should stop asking residents and the public what they think. Councillor Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. How have you ensured that the proposed changes remain fair to everyone on the housing register?
Ms. Stretch?
Yes, so obviously the new homes, we're talking about tenants first, but everybody that's a tenant that moves to one of the new homes will leave an existing home, and those homes will then be allocated to anybody across the housing register. So everybody is getting obviously a fair chance, as is put in here. Obviously, you know, we are a landlord, and it's the housing revenue account money that's gone in to pay for these homes. So obviously that's, and obviously after the consultation, that's the view that tenants should go first. But in terms of remaining fair across the whole of the housing register, the properties that are then become void will be open to all on the housing register, both tenants and general applicants.
Thank you. Councillor Parker. No, sorry, Barber, sorry. Okay, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Page 115, the legal governance implications. Are we assuming that's all that's all been looked at? There's nothing to update.
Yes, sorry, so the reviews come back from legal and there is no issues with the local lettings plan. They're happy with that.
Okay, then we'll go to Councillor Parker first as a committee member.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a question, really. Going back a few years, I understand that from the recommendations that there's a process of giving priority to people who want to downsize or existing tenants and so forth. But are we still running the point system, which we did years ago, which you know, allocated the people with a number of points, they was given first option of the process? We're still doing that, are we?
Yes, we are. In fact, I think there's once it goes down the priority to the general housing list, obviously that applies to that point system. And obviously existing tenants will have a point-based system allocation.
For the new houses with existing tenants, but feeding back on the empty premises, we go down the point system.
Yeah, Borough Council still uses a point-based system. Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. Page 128, by the way, it still refers to Hutton Central. I think that's just a typo. It is, of course, the Great Ward of Hutton North. Couple of things in general. In principle, I think this is a really good idea, and I really welcome the housing team bringing this forward. Local lettings plans allow us to, with brand new housing, create stable communities from day one. It gives more flexibility to the housing team. I think many people who have looked at social media accounts know that people suggest and offer the view as to who might get the housing. And I think when you can establish that it's going to existing local tenants who have looked after and cared for their property well, who have strong links with the community, I think that actually is a very good thing in terms of it aligns the council with the local community. My only one comment would be, truthfully, these are great properties that are being brought into service under the council. But I would wonder whether you could have a little bit flexibility to have that local lettings plan operate longer than till the first lets are all complete. I saw on page 118, section 6, the plan will apply only until all first lets are complete. I would urge you to see whether you have flexibility to continue that, to make sure that you don't get any perverse allocations under the existing housing allocation policy where you say your hands are tied and you have to put someone completely unsuitable into these properties which have taken a while to deliver and are going to be much enjoyed by the people who live there, but they don't want to be spoilt by some of the few tenants who may abuse properties. And if there's a legal way you could actually make it run a bit longer, I would personally ask you to think about that. But I think the proposal in front of us tonight is excellent, first class. Thank you.
Councillor Barber, we will look into that and see what can be done. No further speakers? So then I will move the recommendations, so we'll just go to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much. Again, unanimous. Thank you very much, committee. And now item 10, which is the housing debt write-off. In September 2023, the Housing, Health and Community approved a former debt recovery policy to assist the collection of all former tenants' debts. In line with this, the council are working with an external company to collect former debts. This report is for housing debt write-off. Mrs. March, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Questions and observations. Firstly, I take it, well, I see some of these are over 6 years old. There used to be, I think it's changed, where debt was concerned for arrears on rent, where it wouldn't be looked at by the court unless it was over 800 or so. I believe that's come down to a lower figure, or perhaps I'm wrong. Is it still over 800 or higher?
One of the officers, Brian.
For current tenant arrears, they have a cap where you'd have to be over generally 5 weeks net rent, although most people by the time you get to court are significantly more than that. These are former tenant arrears, so there's no real cap necessarily on how much the courts would necessarily consider but it comes with a charge attached to it, so we'd look at each case in its own merits and whether it would be worthwhile to take that person to court for an amount that was, say, less than £800 if the court costs are going to be significantly near to that or over that.
So it's similar to what we used to do, where basically the debt was quite large before we could actually go chasing it. So we used to, and I'm sure we're doing it, but we used to have a dedicated solicitor on the premises who chased all our bad debts as far as the housing and that was concerned. And every now and again, yes, we had to sit here and vote a write-off. And each year, I'm afraid it's got higher and higher. I don't know what other councils do, but I know what lots of people do in these cases in terms of rent and so on and so forth and bad debts. That when it reaches this stage and we write it off, that they then basically sell the debt to companies that, if they recover it, get probably a large percentage, but the council or whoever's employed them get a sum back. Now, I know there's probably a distaste in some people's mouth about hounding people for debt, but when you look at some of these sums, you know, bankruptcy, well, you know, you could bang your head against a brick wall, but when I was chair of housing many years ago, we noticed that not only were we having debts against this council, but the perpetrators were also going to other councils and running up debts. Now, I don't know if we've got a system where we keep each other informed about this, but a lot of these people do it professionally or do it as a habit, to go from place to place, run up a rental debt. And I think perhaps we might be falling down in not challenging this at no cost to the council by employing outside bodies to chase these debts, so that A, we might deter them from doing it to other people, but also we may, in fact, get some money back.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. I think, as I mentioned at the start, we do actually have an external agency that does deal with some of those debts. I think some of the money, unfortunately, is where the debtor has passed away, or it's gone past the 6 years where you can't actually get the money back. Do the officers have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, exactly that. So we, as soon as a property becomes vacant, we allow a period of 2 weeks for any reconciliations against Universal Credit or housing benefit to take place, and then we forward the debt to a debt recovery agency, an external one, third party, and they have set processes. If we provide them the address, they will write to that address. They will use any emails or contact numbers that we give them. They will also perform traces, so if that person has jumped to another local authority, for instance, or has credit elsewhere, they will look and trace that person and use them addresses to then contact them to chase their debt. So they are collecting debt. The cases that you see before you are ones that are over 6 years old. So we've done some upgrades to our system, which has flagged a lot more cases that were sat in the background and not part of our current reporting system. So that's what makes the vast majority of these cases, they're over 6 years, they're statute barred, and we can't take them to court if we needed to recover them. Some of these cases are from the cases that have gone to our debt collection agency, who have absolutely exhausted all their avenues of recovery, and the amount's just not worthy of taking court action at this stage, if we could even trace them. So they are all down for write-off, but if a person, as you said, bounces around and does this as a profession, as you've called it. If they came back to the council, we would put that debt back on their account and ask them to clear that before they were offered any form of other accommodation through us. And that is a standard practice that we've had for a number of years, but we would put into force if any of these people came forward. So whilst we're saying it is written off, it is always payable if they come back to us at any point in the future.
Councillor Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. The free debts of over £10,000, how was that allowed to happen? So how much of arrears do they have to be in to be evicted?
Ms Marsh.
Yep, so the three cases that you're referring to were what we call means profit accounts. So all three of them are where the actual tenant of the property has passed away and somebody has attempted to succeed that property. That succession has failed and the debt lies with the person that has unfortunately passed away and doesn't necessarily lie with the person that was actually residing there. It's called use and occupation charges, and it's very difficult to claim a use and occupation charge back from somebody who wasn't necessarily the tenancy holder at that time, and all three of them cases were that.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, all my questions have been answered in the last couple of minutes, really. We're talking about evictions and what in the private rented market with the renters' rights. If you go 3 months without paying your rent, you can then you can seek eviction then. And we've of course got the new renters' rights affecting councils March next year, I think it is. And I wonder how that would impact bad debt. I appreciate we're not there yet with renters' rights, so I'm sure that will come back on another.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that the threshold and the evidence that we have to produce as a social landlord to get an eviction, and unfortunately that is why quite often our debt is quite high before we get that eviction. Because effectively, to some extent we are there to pick up the most vulnerable in society and those that are struggling to pay, the threshold that we have to reach to get a judge to pass an eviction on a social housing property is much higher than sometimes exists out in the private sector. So it shouldn't affect us too much with the changes because we are already abiding by those things. But yes, it will affect debt. It is taking a considerable time to get to court. That's part of the issue at the moment, because obviously the courts have got lots of other processes with the private rented sector, etc. We are waiting some considerable time to get a court date, and then after that for a bailiff warrant if somebody doesn't leave. And in all honesty, once somebody has really entered that process, 9 times out of 10 they stop paying completely. So while you are waiting purely to get that case heard, to get your possession, to get that over, we have also been given quite a lot of stays by judges where even though the rent that is owed is thousands of pounds, if the tenant represents themselves or has representation in court, usually the judge will give a stay a couple of times. Quite often what happens is they still don't pay, so that goes up, but we have had to go back to court. Even with legal representation, we've had to go back to court several times before we actually get granted that eviction, and in the meantime their rent arrears are just going up and up and up.
Yeah, just to come back, in an ideal world, officers would like to, I'm sure, they can early intervention would be great. Yeah, pick up the phone. Look, we notice you're in a bit of trouble. Come on in. We'll have an agreement. But of course, you can't do that until it gets to the legal stage. And then, as you suggest, the time goes on, debt builds up, and then eventually written off.
So yeah, them conversations that you're talking about start if their debt is over 50p or more. So our system will automatically trigger if they're going to 50p or more worth of arrears, a telephone call from an officer just to say you might not even be aware at this stage, but you have got a small arrear on your account. You need to adjust what you're paying. You might have missed a payment. So them conversations begin very, very early on. 9 times out of 10, before we're even serving a notice of seeking possession, we have phoned the person, emailed the person. We've sent them what we call a polite reminder letter, which is very much just exactly that. You might not even know that this debt's there. Please contact us. We can help you. They would then have another reminder letter, a pre-warning letter, and then a notice. So each of these actions is 1 to 2 weeks in the process. they have a significant opportunity to contact us and make an arrangement, and we are more than happy to make them arrangements with them at early intervention before we even get to the point of giving a legal notice. Once that legal notice is served, you're then entering the formal legal system, if you like. So you're not at court, but you are saying, if you don't now contact us, we're reserving our right to go to court and ask the judge to make an order. So we do engage in all of the early intervention, and officers are getting much better at that and making sure that they're contacting early doors, but you can't always get through to people, or they might be working, they can't answer their phone. So there's other mitigating factors that support that alongside people who genuinely can't pay, and we need to support as well.
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, I've seen a steady increase in these debts, unfortunately, since the universal credit system has been introduced. Prior to that, housing benefit was paid directly to the council. Mr. Watts.
Yeah, sorry, just probably an educational thing for me. Just looking at the report we were looking at earlier in the total arrears of just over £1 million, and then looking at the write-off amount that we're looking at, do they impact each other, or are they two completely different things? So if the write-off's made, does that total amount drop?
So they're two completely different figures. So you've got your current tenant arrears, which is anybody that is actively in a tenancy. These are people that have left a tenancy and have gone to another property elsewhere. 9 times out of 10, that is a property that is outside of the council, otherwise they wouldn't be on this list and we would still be chasing them.
But, sorry, just to add, it will take it off of the £750,000 former tenant arrears. That number will then significantly come down. And the reason you write this off is you have to hold money against that bad debt provision. So if you can't collect it, you need to write it off and do so regularly, which is why we've gone all the way back through our debts and we're writing off a significant proportion. Because what you don't want to be doing is having to hold money against something that really is uncollectible, because it gives you less money to be able to do things with. So, yeah, the figure in the performance report of former tenant arrears will come down significantly should this report be approved.
I think the next question for me is, and excuse me for my kind of poor use of language around kind of the formal language used in this. We're using the word debt quite a lot. Whose debt is that? Is that tenant debt, or is that council debt? The money that we're writing off, is it loss of profit? Is that money owed to someone else? What money is this, or is this not money that actually really exists? It's just not paid to the council.
Yeah, so it's the debt of the tenant, but ultimately is a debt to us as the landlord who it was owed. If I'm honest, there is already provision to cover this bad debt. So the only thing that we are not that it's not important, we'd like it back, but obviously what we are losing is the ability to get that money in, to have that income to ever spend it on anything else. But in terms of the budget, this is already covered by what we call bad debt provision. It's a finance accountancy term. The only way I can describe it is in a casino, you have to be able to cover in money every chip that you've got on the floor. We have to have money to be able to cover every debt, the piece of debt that we have. So we are effectively, it'll be a accountancy thing to write that off. Yeah, the only difference is obviously if we could collect it, which we're obviously saying we can't, that's less income that we've got to spend it on other matters. So it's loss of that. To some extent, yeah. We just never call it earnings, but yes.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. I note on page 168, garages, it says 287, and then the amount of debt of arrears is £71,273.51p. Do we know which garages that these relate to? And therefore, by assumption, are we able to provide a kind of economic analysis of how useful this asset is to the council if it's in poor condition, for example, potentially, it's attracted quite a lot of debt. That debt's not been paid, and it may require significant sums to remove it. And does that then link into the assets process? Because I'm aware that we did carry out various garages review, and so therefore one wonders if some of these garages are effectively irredeemable.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. I think if we get into a long discussion about garages, this could go on all evening. So I think we do definitely take in the debt provision into the case when we're looking at the assets of the garages, but I think garages and the strategy more broadly needs more work, because there are a lot of garages that aren't profitable or useful, but they're very expensive to do anything else with. So, Councillor Mayo.
Thank you. Page 170, there's a very good statement from Housing Partners, which really sums up exactly how I feel about this issue. Two quick questions. One, will Housing Partners get a response to what they're asking for here, and how will that be delivered? And the second, there is mention of a tenancy sustainment policy. What is this, and how might it help in this case?
Yeah, so we have quarterly meetings with our housing partners. Obviously, Aaron is here today representing that panel of residents, so he will naturally feed back to them as well. But we also have quarterly meetings, and feedback from the committee and their comments is provided, and we have an ongoing communication with them. So they will absolutely get a response to the queries that they've raised. In regards to the tenancy sustainment policy, this is due to come back to a future committee. It's a new policy that we're introducing, and it outlines how we intend to help people stay in their tenancies. And it does cover things such as arrears, plus a broad spectrum of other things as well. But there is a strong focus on how we're going to support them alongside our income management policy and the provision that's in there to support residents as well.
Thank you. Councillor Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. Of the debt that's being written off, how much do you believe could still be recovered if people's circumstances change? So if they needed to come back into like council, would the debt then go back onto? Would they be allowed back in a council house?
So if they were to come back and approach us, let's say through the homeless route, for instance, they would be advised that debt is there. Their circumstances would be taken into consideration, and they would either be, if they had the provision to, pay that off in full. If not, under our tenancy sustainment policy and our allocations policy, we have provision to help people clear that debt whilst they're still considered for accommodation. So we have various different policies that they would fall within. Doesn't necessarily mean that because they've got this debt that they would never be able to come back into our stock. It just means that that piece of debt would be written back on, and they would be responsible for clearing that, even if it was gradually over a period of time.
Okay, thank you very much. And lastly, Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Wrigley was talking about the garages, and on the information on page 168, that is the second highest debt in relationship to everything else except for tenant arrears. It's a question, really. In normal, garages and so forth, when they're privately owned, which I know a little bit about, usually 2 months or even 3 months rent in advance is required. Do we actually invoke that? Do we look for, if you're renting the premises at a house, it's a month in advance or 2 months or 3 months in the hands of the agent that you supply. So I wonder if we was to have prepayment, and then if they wish to leave, they give a month's notice or 2 months' notice, they don't pay, and that money is in hand. If we just let them come in on a normal rate and they stop, by the time we found out that they stopped paying, we've probably lost 3 months' rent. So do we, or should we, or would it be a good idea to have money up front before we let them into the garages?
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Before we move on to that one, I guess a lot of this is probably people moving out, forgetting to have a garage, cutting their direct debit, and then moving out the borough. But that's what is in my ward at the moment, and it causes issues there that garages we don't know that no one's using them. One of the officers want to come in on garage prepayment. I'm assuming we do.
So no, we don't ask for payment up front, and this has been part of our income management policy and rent setting policies for a significant period of time. But it is something that we are looking at across kind of all our tenancies as such. A lot of people who are private, for instance, and non-council tenants who rent will go into a direct debit, and then they're never kind of in arrears because we claim that. But as Councillor Barrett just said, a lot of these are where people have left the garage and just not realise that they need to terminate that and tell us that they need to terminate that. and they've sat for a significant period of time, but a lot of these go back a long, long time because of the upgrades that we've done to the system, so they're not all necessarily current garage arrears. Some of these are from many years ago, some of them are from residents themselves, and again, where a tenant is deceased, their properties has run, and they've had a garage as well, so that has run until we've terminated them both.
Okay, thank you very much. I will move the recommendation on page 167 that the committee approves the former tenant debt of £599,163.95 as set out in the report is presented to the section 151 in conjunction with the Chair of Finance and Future Development Committee for approval for write-off. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much, and I'll just go to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous again. Item 11 is the domestic abuse policy, which the report begins on page 133 of the agenda. This report seeks the committee's recommendation to the council for approval of a new Brentwood domestic abuse policy. The policy provides a clear corporate framework for how the council will identify, respond and support residents affected by domestic abuse, recognises its significant impact on victims, children, families and communities. Mr. Brace or Mr. Steer, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing to add. Open to questions.
Okay. Councillor Davies.
I welcome the report and the recommendation, Chair, but I'm absolutely horrified when I read it to find there was 3.8 million reported cases of domestic abuse in this country. I mean, it's something, you're aware goes on, but when you see the figures and how it impacts families, I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. And when you heard recently, they were saying with the World Cup, because we dropped out, that raised the levels of domestic abuse. I find it quite depressing to think that humanity is such that there is that level of abuse. I know we're only a tier 2 partner in this, and obviously we have to work with Essex County Council, but I do welcome it because I think it does have significant impact on the health and well-being aspects of families, particularly women and children, not exclusively, but particularly women and children. And it's good to know that with the strengthening up of this policy, we may be able to offer safe accommodation and protect some of those victims and children, and also give them some continuity of care. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Aaron.
Thank you, Chair. What are the main improvements in this updated policy, and what difference do you expect these changes to be made for residents?
Mr. Brace, did you want to carry on that? I think this is a new policy rather than an update.
Yes, this is a new policy, and really the point is giving anybody that's suffering from domestic violence the ability to know what to do and try and build confidence what to do. So alongside this policy, we will be doing a campaign to communicate that out to all residents. We'll be doing White Ribbon. We're going for accreditation in November this year. So we'll be doing lots of drip feeding of information in the hope that those suffering from domestic abuse will contact one of those groups or us to get support. So this is more to highlight the campaign, to get more people to report and support them, and to kind of give them assurance that they'll be safe if they report. So that's our target, to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I think the report's good. I think it's needed, and I think possibly it will make a lot of difference to people if we undertake what's in the report. Bear with me. I know this is being unnecessarily critical, but the recommendation, 2 lines, well actually 1.5 lines, I don't think gives this report and the gravity that it should have. The recommendation would be better if it was put above the report summary. That first 2 paragraphs at the top of the page is worth the recommendation and that recommendation would have made it have more impact. It's a criticism, I know, but I just think 1.5 lines does not do the report, or the seriousness of the subject, it doesn't do it any favours.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I tend to agree with Councillor Parker. It's a very good report, it's great policy. I think people need to understand what behaviour is defined as domestic abuse, and we've seen it on TV shows, and with people that are men and women that are living with this and not knowing that they are a victim of domestic abuse. We need more power to be able to get that information out there. In relation to the recommendations, I had to read that about a dozen times to understand it, because I had to look up in the council meeting on meeting calendars to see what was happening on the 23rd. It's full council, of course. But yeah, with my mind, I found that very difficult to read. I was like, what are we actually doing here? So we're endorsing the domestic abuse policy to be sent to full council for ratification. That's how I'd like to have read it, but yeah, it took me a little while. But yeah, it's just go back to the people that that live with domestic abuse and don't even realise that they're suffering from that, or a victim of that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I mean, obviously, this is going to the full council for formal adoption by this council. We can look up the if any changes we can make to push the recommendation. We'll do that before it goes to that ordinary council meeting. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Brace.
I just wanted to highlight, I've just looked at the police stats up to the end of June this year, and there have been 651 cases of reported domestic abuse. That's reported. It will be significantly more than that.
Thank you. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. I'll look at the policy, obviously. A couple of points, though. I think we refer to a lot of the agencies and other organisations that we work with. It still isn't clear to me what the ideal process is in terms of the procedure to be followed should a councillor, for example, or an officer have cause for concern in a particular case. Many of the things which we are told verbally. The degree of confidentiality is unclear. We're not legal experts. We're not experts in mental health. And putting stuff into a portal, for example, could be quite problematic to record what we've been verbally told, usually. So could I ask that perhaps the procedure and the process, particularly for councillors and staff, is considered and shared in due course? And then the other one is perhaps with maybe Councillor Davis leading, would be to perhaps have a training session for councillors in particular, but staff as well, to actually take them through how they would respond in certain situations, what would be appropriate, what wouldn't, because I do think it is a minefield and very difficult for people to make very quick judgments what they should do when they're told something and how they progress it. And if we could give some thought to that over the coming months, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think this overlaps a bit with the safeguarding policy, and I think there is safeguarding training that happens regularly for councillors, and I think we hopefully can incorporate that into that piece of work. Does any officers have anything else to add?
Yes, for those that were keen-eyed and were looking at the housing improvement plan that has been through this committee several times, we said we would do the policy and there'll be a training programme and procedures that are around that. We're already working out what that training programme is going to be. We've been contacted by someone to do that. The advice I would give to any member that is spoke to by a resident regarding this subject matter, we've got Kim Anderson and Sean Steer, who are both safeguarding leads that will support you and give you all the information you need in that interim period. Any concerns, you can speak to both of those people confidentially. Okay, so that will be my tip at this stage, but we'll be doing full training and procedures that will follow this quite quickly.
Councillor Pound.
I think really Councillor Barber has more or less said what I wanted to say. I think this is one of these areas where very often, as a councillor, you're the person that they come to, and it's vital that we know how to deal with it. I think for somebody to actually get to that stage, they've been incredibly brave, and we need to know that we don't put a foot wrong and that we don't discourage them, and that they feel that in any way that they shouldn't be speaking to us. So, no, that help would be very much appreciated.
Mr. Watts.
I've stepped out of my boundary, so I'll sit back.
Okay, sorry, yes, I guess it isn't related to housing, so, well, directly anyway. If no further speakers, I'll move the recommendation, and just to make it clearer, I'll just say the committee recommends the approval of the domestic abuse policy at the ordinary council meeting on the 23rd of September 2026. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to item 12, which is the Brentwood Community Safety Partnership. So we're on pack 2 of the agenda. This report provides an overview of the progress made by the Community Safety Partnership in delivering activity to address the key priorities identified within the partnership's Community Safety Strategy and Action Plan. Mr. Brace or Mr. Steer, do you have anything to add?
Nothing else to add. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Not so much a question, but observation. Great report. It's great to see the priorities. I'm getting more and more reports of antisocial behaviour because of young people on electric bikes and e-scooters, and also I think that I'm doing a little piece of work with the police on reporting ASB and where people should actually report that. A lot of the time it's the council that they should be reporting it to, and only when it's an offence that it should be reported to the police. And again, it's an education piece, making people understand where they should be reporting it to. But in the high streets, I've noticed it myself just the other day. Some kids whizzing around, some young people whizzing around in the multi-storey car park, not doing anything too untoward, but they're on electric bikes and scooters, which of course is illegal in a public place. And of course, by the time you call it in, if you like, they're gone. So it's really hard to enforce that kind of behaviour. However, for anyone that is listening, the police are doing a great job at confiscating such vehicles. Thank you for the report.
Councillor Rigby.
This report is somewhat of a swan song, as I have passed on the Community Safety Partnership torch, in fact, to yourself, Chair. But it gives me an opportunity to look back over the period, and we have made considerable progress, for which I'm grateful for officers for, and that progress has been achieved through partnership, through working closely with the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, whose office and whose work needs to be acknowledged in this respect. It is a partnership. Also in partnership with others, such as Mr. Watts, who's now left us, and so can't hear the praise I'm going to offer in his direction, because the common sense of our partners, our community partners, who offer advice in terms of tackling things like antisocial behaviour and so on and so forth is important. I'd just like to flag up two other important partners. One is Brentwood Connected and the work of the Town Rangers. I think anyone who's come into contact with the Town Rangers would say that they work quite hard for what they do, that they have been active, they have been able to drive down retail crime. Obviously that's an ongoing issue, it's an ongoing problem, and it requires an ongoing solution, but I would praise Brentwood Connected for their work in that respect. I echo many of the concerns that Councillor Russell has made, because I've made them myself, and Mr. Brace knows that, as does Mr. Steer. So, you know, those issues in relation to antisocial behaviour, they do need tackling. We are coming into the summer. There will be a programme of activity, as I understand it, to tackle it, but tackle it we must, okay, because we must make sure that our high streets, wherever they are, Brentwood, Shenfield, Ingatestone, or even in my own ward of Hutton East, remain safe, remain secure, and that our CSP is prevalent across the whole borough and not just the most urban and populous bits. It is a work in progress. It will require continued funding. It will require continued support. And one of the partners that needs to be most supported at this time is our police. Essex Police is underfunded. Commissioner's told me so. Okay, our MP says so. I say so. Parties opposite say so. We must fund our police more. And I think that is really important going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mayo.
Thank you, Chair. A good report. I've had some positive interaction off the back of the CSP in terms of parking issues, very long-standing parking issues in Sawyers Lane, which everybody here is well aware of at school run time, and some very good work by a dedicated officer has made a difference down there, there's no question. Just some feedback for those who are going to be involved in the CSP going forward, including you, Chair. Page 215 is the small amount that is provided regarding SEP and parking enforcement. The table that's given us is not an awful lot of use because it's just a set of numbers basically, so it's my usual bugbear of what's the comparator, how does this look in terms of you know, other areas that are similar to Brentwood. The other thing is, this is a report on basically Brentwood High Street and surrounding area, but I'm sure other parts of the borough would like to know how parking enforcement is going on in Shenfield and Ingatestone and Hutton and everywhere else. So I think they really ought to widen this to show what sort of impact they are having in other parts of the borough as well. So if that can be fed back, I would be grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Mayo. Yeah, we'll feed that back and make sure some of the areas are addressed with numbers that show a variance, if possible. No further speakers. Bit of a strange recommendation, this one, so I think I'll just agree to note this report. Is that all agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move to item 13, is the safeguarding policy and procedures on page 235. Brentwood Borough Council's safeguarding policy and procedures provides guidance and procedures that can support staff and elected members on their legal obligations to safeguard children, young people and adults with care and support needs and what to do if they have any safeguarding concerns. Mrs Anderson, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. This policy is reviewed and updated every 3 years, just so that it aligns with any new legislation changes, and it's set out in 2 parts. So there's section A is the policy and section B is the procedures. So I just wanted to highlight some key changes in the legislation, but there's more detail set out in Appendix 10 of the actual policies and procedures. There's the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Act, so that strengthens safeguarding in schools. The new Working Together document, so again it's looking at those extended family members and kinship care, so it strengthens issues around that. The Renters' Rights Act that we've touched on previously, so around no fault evictions, and it limits rent increases. The Terrorism Protection of Premises Act, which is commonly known as Martin's Law, so that looks to improve protective security and organisational preparedness across the UK. So it requires certain premises, so that'd be like your community halls and things like that, to ensure that they've taken steps to prepare for any potential terrorist acts. And, sorry, just bear with me. Lost my page. The new social housing regulation, so that strengthens tenants' rights and landlords' accountability. The Online Safety Act, so there's a lot of stuff in the news at the moment around keeping our children safe online. And then the Working Together to Safeguard Children, so that is how we work in partnership with other bodies. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Do I have any questions from the committee? No? Okay. We're going for a long agenda here, and it's getting hotter. So I'll move the recommendations on page 235 of the agenda, which is that members approve the revised safeguarding policy and procedures 2026-29 for children, young people and adults with care and support needs as set out in Appendix A. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, that's unanimous again. Now we move on to item 14. Councillor Russell, you wanted to declare a... 17, sorry, okay, yep, sorry. I was passing over a few pages at once. Item 14, which is the Brentwood Community and Voluntary Service, the BCVS annual report, which begins on page 293. Brentwood Community and Voluntary Service was formed in 1993 as a registered charity with the aim of providing supporting voluntary and community sector organisations in Brentwood Borough. This is information for members to note the annual report. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Mayo.
Thank you, Chair. I actually was at Brentwood CVS last week, as it's on my doorstep. It's at Marymead House now. As usual, excellent work being going on there. There's the community cafe was sitting, a really good resource. I also wanted to hear about the dementia hub that's been set up, which I'm hoping can continue past September. There's some funding pressures there. I think the thing I would like to highlight, it's not really a question, it's to make sure that everybody on this committee understands how much work is done by the staff of the CVS just to raise funds, just to apply for grant after grant, and how much time that takes. And it would be so much more preferable if we could have longer term funding settlements for groups such as the Brentwood CVS, because they could be doing an awful lot more with their time if they weren't having to go through application after application. They're doing some wonderful work. I know the hosting of the weddings at Marymead is going very, very well from what I understand, so that is helping with the income that is required, but without any question they're an excellent resource for this town, and we need to support them as best we can.
Thank you, Councillor Mayo, very much agreed. If I don't have any further speakers, we'll just note that report. Is that agreed? Okay, item 15 is Brentwood Community Transport Annual Performance. The report begins on page 309. The council currently provides core funding to Brentwood Community Transport of £30,000 per year through a grant funding agreement. Brentwood Community Transport also receives core funding from Essex County Council. As part of this grant funding and monitoring of the contract, the Brentwood Community Transport provides regular performance data to officers. That is the requirement. That there is a requirement that an annual performance report comes to the relevant committee each year. Mrs. Anderson, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add to the report, but I would say this ties in with the previous report around we will bring a further report back to committee around longer term funding for those organisations that we provide core funding for.
Thank you. Okay, if we've got no speakers on this issue, again, another fantastic organisation supporting Brentwood residents. Do we all note that report? Thank you. Now it's item 16, Place for Culture Fund on page 337. The Place for Culture Fund 2026 is the first grant funding allocated to support priorities outlined in A Place for Culture, the borough's creative and cultural strategy for 2025 to 2030. Sorry, I have to move the standing orders because we're just past 9 o'clock. Is that agreed for another half hour, hopefully? Mrs. Anderson, do you have anything else to add to the report?
Nothing to add. So grants were available for between 1 and 5,000. So the provisional allocation for 2026 is set out in Appendix A, and we also seek approval for that allocation of funding and agree for the delegation to delegate authority for the final determination for the 2027 funding. It will be reported back within the Chair's report for those 2027 allocations.
Thank you. So I will now move the recommendations on page 338 of the agenda. R1, the committee approves the recommended allocation of the 2026 grants as set out in Appendix A. R2, that the committee approves delegated authority for the final determinations of the grant expenditure for the 27 programme to the Director of Communities, Leisure and Health in consultation with the Chair of Housing, Health and Community Committee, with an update provided to the relevant committee. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions from the committee at this stage? Councillor Mayo.
Quick comment. Good to see transparency around how these grants have been assessed. Good to see why certain of them have not been recommended. I think that helps us all to see that, you know, scrutiny is being done, and I think the criteria is being met. So I hope these are very useful to the projects involved.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Echo the comments of Councillor Mayo. Just a few observations. A lot of these refer to urban Brentwood, which is obviously lovely in its own way, but obviously it applies to the whole of the borough, and obviously my residents in Hutton, I think, would certainly be interested in participating in things like that. So when it comes to publicising these, I noticed that you've got the kind of proper local, the magazine that will go out to creative people. Can awareness of these opportunities, particularly where they're looking for participants, be visible through council social media? Because I think that's important. Also through the Borough magazine, so that the widest possible number of residents, including from my own ward, for example, who want to take part, can take part. I'm not saying that, that this is overly weighted towards urban Brentwood, but there's sometimes Brentwood can sometimes collapse what is meant by the borough, and it's all our borough, and it's all our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. We'll look into that. I think that, I think probably seen by the Locality Grant, we are trying all of our social media channels to try and get that out message so people can know that the funding is available and know where to go to apply for it. And I think all of the future funding, we can do a similar model. But thank you. Okay. I don't think I have any further speakers. Okay, so I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous. And now we move to item 17, the asset community value Eagle Field, Kelvin Hatch on page 345. Councillor Russell, did you want to declare any interest?
Yes, so I spoke to the monitoring officer earlier today, and so it is a tenuous pecuniary interest. The outcome of this could affect me financially by way of a loss of value to my property, which is nearby, as other neighbours as well. But without disclosing my address, I live nearby, and it could affect the value of my property. So, if I may, I will.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. We only have one item afterwards. I don't know if you don't have to return it. Pardon? Okay. We'll keep that on the record for your agreement. Thank you. So, the Localism Act 2011 introduced the community right to buy, a new right for local people to nominate buildings or pieces of land that they believe contributed to the social interest or well-being of their local communities to be listed on the Register of Assets of Community Value managed by the local authority. The right applied to public and private property, or there are a number of exceptions under legislation, including private residences. So, Mrs. Anderson, do you have anything to add?
Just to say, within the report, we received a request from Kelverton Hatch Parish Council to nominate this land as an asset of community value. It was initially listed in March 2020. Then there was a request to declassify it in 2024, and we received a valid nomination, i.e. it's got all of the information there, in June 2026. Part of the asset of community value is it's got to meet the 2 statutory tests, so that's its recent usage. So I would say prior to 2021, it did have community use, but for the last 5.5 years, it has been fenced off and there is no public access. And also to consider if there's future usage, is that realistic? So what I would say is only if the current landowner decides to sell, then potentially it could go back to community use. And I would say that at the end of the day, if the landowner wants to sell, then there is a moratorium period where the nominating body has first right to refusal and exclusive priority to purchase the asset. That moratorium extends from 6 to 12 months under the new legislation. What I would also say is that this does not necessarily protect the land if you're going through a planning process. So at the end of the day, it's on the call to sites in the local development plan, and I'd also say that it doesn't mean to say that it will be developed, but potentially residents can make their representations known as part of the planning process. So there's two elements to this, the planning process and an asset of community value. One doesn't necessarily protect the land from development. So I just want to make that clear. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mrs Anderson. I just want to note that the Office of Assessment is that the recommends that the land is listed as there is previous community usage on the site until recently and could be again. So therefore I will move the recommendations at this point that we list this as an asset of community value. The members list the land known as Eaglefield, Kelton Hatch, as an asset of community value as nominated by Kelton Hatch Parish Council as recommended in the Office of Assessment as set out in Appendix G. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parker.
Quite divided over this, Chair. We're asking to make a decision. The officer report actually is a toss of a coin report, no disrespect, because she lays out as many fors as many against. So it is really a toss of a coin as far as whether it was the officer moved for approval or did not. The problem is that the parish councils are very divided on this, and they reached their decision by one vote to come to Brentwood Council for this to happen. The other thing is that I was party to the original when it was originally put on the asset register some 5 years ago, when it made sense then because it was up for sale. I think it was Lord Peter's property, and it went up for auction. The council, the parish council had it on peppercorn rent for 20 odd years, where people could walk their dog and so on and so forth. And when it came up for auction, they did make an attempt to raise the money to purchase it. Unfortunately for them, they was way out in terms of the financial amount they was able to get promised, and it was sold. Belatedly, they came to the council, as the officer has said, to ask it to be removed from the asset register. It should have been removed earlier because the sale had gone ahead, but nobody got round to actually saying about it. And it's not been open to the public for 5 years, well, 5.5 years, I think it is. So it's been fenced off, work has been done on it to the boundary. Unfortunately, with the sale of it, the owners of the property that run along one side of it had creeped onto the land, and there was a little bit of a altercation to get their parameters back to where they belong, and then it was all fenced off and it's been used for grazing. So it's not been used for 5 years in terms of an asset to the public. So it's not up for sale. So I find a problem there because there's no reason for it to be negotiated between the owner and the parish council. And it is up for development. There is a planning application in, which is yet to be decided. So, you know, I'm just giving this background. It's up to the members here to decide whether they feel that it represents a good case to be put on the asset register. But I just have my doubts of the fact that it's not been used by the public for 5 years. it's in new ownership. That ownership has obviously bought it to try and get planning permission. I think going on the register at this moment in time is probably too early. It should be if planning is turned down and nothing goes ahead. I suspect then the landowner will want to sell it. Then it's up to the parish council to try and buy it. But I don't know. I think it's a bit of a mismatch at the moment, and I can't see the fact that it's been out of the parish council's hands for over 5 years, that it meets the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to remind you that this doesn't actually affect its ability to gain planning. That's a completely separate issue. So if the owner is not selling the land, it can still apply for a planning permission, it can still build on it. This will have no effect on that process.
No, I realise
it only
that.
protects it against a sale, and I think the Kelvedon Hatch Parish Council are well in their rights to protect that asset for sale, so that they can have their community right to buy on it. Councillor Davies.
Sorry, Councillor.
I live in Kelvedon Hatch, but nowhere near the fields, so I don't have an interest in that sense. But many years ago, I was on the parish council in Kelvedon Hatch, and at that time, it was Lord Rodney's estate, actually, that we were leasing the land off. And for many, many years, as the report indicates, it was used for dog walking, picnic areas, and it became a real stable part of the area's green open spaces. Now, I know, and it has been said, that what we decide tonight will not make an ounce of difference to the decisions that come through to the planning committee. However, I think, you know, as councillors, we are there to represent our residents. And it's the residents that are coming forward with the parish council saying, look, this may have been fenced off from us for the last 5 years, but it's still there as a green open lung in an area where there is a lot of development going on. Already there's development going on opposite the fields, adjacent to the pub, and down Stocks Lane, the Blackmore Road. There is a tremendous amount of development coming in the village, and that's what's making people think, well, hang on a minute, let's try and hang on to something that we've got. And planning is a separate issue, and I'm not on planning, but they'll have a lot of issues with drainage if they do build on that. That's another story. But here, they've actually set up a Greenbelt Action Group, and there's 70 members, and that's the locality, 70 people. That's along with the parish council, who have obviously, I'm not a member of that parish council now, but I know that they've had discussions, and as Councillor Parker said, they've come to a decision, a majority decision, that they want to try to retain this green area. It may not work. It may not work at all. But I do feel we owe it to the residents to allow them to have the opportunity to try and protect this area, because, my goodness me, it's supposed to be a semi-rural area, and it's very rapidly diminishing in that sense. We're under threat the whole time. So I would ask members to consider that we go ahead with what the officers are recommending tonight and support this. What comes in the future may be something completely different, but I do feel that we should listen, and it would be a great loss, I tell you, to lose that open space. Even if they can't walk on it now, it's still green, it's still open, and it's still helping with the environmental issues. So I feel quite strong, but I rest my case, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. So I accept fully what is said about that the assets process and the planning processes are two different processes. I am a member of the planning committee, and I think it would be wrong for me to express an opinion on the positives or negatives in relation to this particular decision. So I will be abstaining on any vote that is called. But I've heard the debate. I've welcomed Councillor Parker's really helpful contributions, as I do Councillor Davies. I've absorbed the information, but I will abstain on this particular vote.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rigby. That's your right. Do I have any other speakers? Okay, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, anyone against? Abstentions? Okay, thank you, that's passed. Thank you very much. Yes, exactly, it's passed, just not unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 18 is the Community Work Programme. The report sets out the work programme for the committee 2026-27 municipal year. Ms Stretch or Mr Brace, did you have anything to add?
Nothing to add. Thank you, Chair.
I will move the recommendations on page 379. The committee notes and endorses the work programme for the remainder of the municipal year and considers any further items that need to be added. Do I have a seconder?
I second this item, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have any questions or comments from the committee? No? Okay, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And that is the last of the... That concludes the business this evening, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you very much, everyone. We were under the half an hour extra. Thank you very much.